part 2 of the video. Part 1 was just raising the grade of those pillars like you saw. Now we're kind of prepping the stone. So we have all of our flagstone here that I'm sitting on. And we're prepping it. What do I mean by that? Well, we're cleaning it off. We're doing some basic chipping of the stone just to get it ready. And we're separating it into sizes. That's what I have over here. Different rows of, that's my 1/2 inch. This is all nominal 1/2 inch rock thickness, but there's definitely a lot of plus or minus in there. Some as much as a plus an inch, you know, that you may need to chip off, because if I get too much thickness, then there's no amount of mortar that I can use, or little mortar that I can use to make the patio top flush. So that's why I'm separating it into thicknesses. I want to know before I grab a rock how thick it is, approximately how much mortar I'm going to need to lay down, how thick that bed of mortar needs to be. So to start with the cleaning part of the job, these rocks are really dirty. For example, this rock here looks pretty nice. If I take my wire brush to it, look at all that stuff coming off. And a lot of the rocks are like that. So now it's a nice smooth surface. And I'm doing this to both sides of the rock, whether or not it's going to be in the mortar bed on that side or on this side. I'm cleaning both sides now so that it's ready. And then before I stack it over here, I'm deciding which side I like. So you might have a good side, bad side. To me, I like this side. It's pretty smooth, but it's got a low roughness to it in comparison to this side. And I can see when looking at it, it's an inch and a quarter thick. I've kind of been able to gauge that. Originally, I was using a tape measure to measure it, but now I know. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in my inch and a quarter row. And it's ready to use. Sometimes you come up to a rock that has a differing thickness throughout the rock, like this one. That's because all these rocks, these are sedimentary rocks, so they've laid over on top of each other. They were sand and they were compacted over time, and then they were dug out of quarries. So you end up with these layers stacked on top of each other, and those layers can come off. This plane that you see here, this lower plane, it continues through the entire rock. So if you have a chisel and a hammer, usually you can shave that off and have a uniform thickness throughout. So I've got a hammer, 1 pound little mallet hammer, and I've got this chisel from Home Depot. It's got this nice little guard for your hand. Sometimes you're swinging and you miss the chisel. But yeah, you just put it in position. This is a rock chisel, by the way. It's specifically for this. Put it in position, give it some taps. You want to have glasses on because you're going to have little shards of rock shooting out everywhere. We give it some taps. And you start having pieces fall away. And that's the thickness that I want. Actually, it's one level above the thickness that I want. But that's such a small difference in thickness that it's not going to matter at the end of the day. So I need to get this piece off, and that same goes for all these rocks. So this is my little chipping area when I need to adjust thicknesses. So that's what I'm doing. I'm adjusting thicknesses, I'm wire brushing the rocks. Are prepped now. We have 1.5 inches, which is our nominal thickness on this middle row, 1.25 inches, a little thinner, and then 1.75 inches and above. And in the back we have like 2 inches and above. I could chip those down and make them thinner, but I figure we just leave them as they are now. And if we finish the patio with these rocks, then those thicker rocks can be used in the gravel portion on the side of the house for stepping stones. So I don't need to shave them off, and it's better if they're thicker anyway because they'll be less susceptible to cracking. And we have some even thinner rocks very close to the camera here. So I split them up by thickness. I mixed in the textures and the different colors. Now I didn't have a separate row for that just because I wanted them all to, I want to be able to decide on a rock based on the thickness. So they're all clean, they're all chipped, and they're ready to be placed, dry in place, so we can kind of fit this jigsaw together. I'm going to target all of my joints to be, my gaps between the stones to be between 1/2 inch and 1 inch in thickness. That may be pretty ambitious. I don't know. I've never done this before, but I like to be within that range as far as how wide the gaps are. I don't want some gaps to be much bigger or smaller than that. One important consideration I know of to start is we need to make sure we have a slope on this pad. We already have a slope. It's about 2 inches per 7 feet, which is much more than we really need. So part of me separating the thicknesses of these stones is to make sure that I pick the ones that are right for the right spot on the patio. Part of that consideration is where the siding is. So this is the siding of the house. I don't want to modify that siding. I don't want to take this piece off and have to do anything with it. So what I need to do, since I only have about an inch and maybe about 2 inches of space here, is I can't use my thickest rocks. This is 1 3/4 inches. If I push it in there, it's right up against that siding. I don't want that. I want there to still be a gap. Ideally, I would have a much bigger gap than what I'm left with, but this is where the siding is right now. And like I said, I don't really want to cut it. Take it off and have to cut it. So I use my thinner piece, which is I think about 1 inch, 1.25 inches. Put it in there, and I have still about a 1/2 inch gap, which is good enough. I'm probably going to leave a gap behind the piece and caulk that seam at the end using something called Sika. It's a self-leveling expansion joint mix, and that's how we'll use it. So like I said, we started with the thin stuff. This is 1.5 inches, and if we need to, we'll go to our 1 3/4 inches stuff at the end. I know I'm working kind of counter to the slope with the thicknesses here, but that's just the way I have to do it if I want to meet my my height below my siding on this end. And plus I know that I have enough slope in reserve. I've got about 2 inches of slope on this 8-foot wide patio, so that's plenty. So if I cut into that by a 1/2 inch just because of the way that I'm laying my rocks, I'm okay with that. So let's get to the rocks here and how we're laying them. So I'm trying to lay out some of the bigger rocks first to make sure that those are well spread out and distributed across the patio, and then I fill in with the smaller rocks as I go. And I'm also trying to spread out colors and textures to where they're not a cluster of a certain color or texture in one area. So what I decided to use was this big piece here. It's kind of rectangular in shape. Kind of use it right here. And the first thing you notice is that the pieces don't fit. Of course they don't fit. This is natural flagstone. You have to cut them. So I'm using just a sidewalk chalk to mark the pieces, and in this case I could either cut this piece to fit here, or I could cut the piece that I've laid here to fit with this piece. So in this case it's just easier. I'll go ahead and cut this piece, and like I said, I want my 1/2 inch to 1 inch gap, so about a space of 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and there's my line for cutting. To cut, I'm just using a 4.5 inch angle grinder. This is from Harbor Freight. This thing is literally $14. $14. I didn't want to use my own, my regular 4.5 inch grinder because this thing is kicking out so much dust and stuff from the stone that I know this thing is going to go out on me eventually during this project, which is fine. I got a 90-day warranty. If anything happens to it, go bring it back, get a brand new one for $14 once again. So good deal. And that's how I'm doing the project. And then your smaller stones just kind of fit in. So this is a scrap that I had earlier. I'm not throwing away any of my scraps because I know I'll be able to use them somewhere. I got a little gap right here. This guy looks like he'll fit well. I just got to shave him a little bit and I'll go right in there. So it's kind of interspersed, medium size, large size, small size stones until you get a nice pattern like this. Well, this is pretty cool. My Harbor Freight angle grinder is still going, still kicking. I'm surprised it's lasted this long. I do have a second one in standby, so I have to stop the job and bring this one back and exchange it for a new one. I can just keep rolling with the second one and bring that back whenever I have time. But this is the cool part. These blades were the same size. They're both 4.5 inch masonry cutting diamond tipped blades. And you can see how much smaller this one is. The entire diamond studded area is completely gone. So that's how much cutting I've done with this. And the interesting part is these blades actually cost only $1 less than the angle grinder itself. That's how cheap this stuff is. So anyway, I'm gonna put the new blade on and keep going. All right, everybody, I've gotten to the point now where I'm starting to lay out this outer border. All the inside rocks are my thinner rocks, 1.5 inches, moving to 1.25 inches. I'm out of those rocks, and now I'm using 1 3/4 inches as I work this way. And like I mentioned, I'm kind of working counter to my slope so that I can keep some space below my siding over there. So if you don't have this situation, maybe you don't need to think about this so much, because you can compensate for the slope you need by just adding more mortar if you have nothing that's limiting you vertically as you go. So you can slope your flagstone whatever way you need to. But in my case, I got this restriction. So I've got this big 7-foot level here, and I'm going and checking my slope right now, making sure that I have slope all the way across, and I'm trying to point out any particular thickness outliers as far as the stones that I've already laid and these new ones that are coming, to take them over and chip them and make them thinner if I have to. So I'm on this rock right here now, and you may not be able to see it in view, but it's quite a bit thicker than the other rocks that I've just laid and already trimmed down thinner. And when I put my level here, it's touching this rock and it's not touching any other rock until we get to the far end, and there's hardly any slope at all. So I know just looking at it that it needs to be trimmed, but also I don't achieve my slope by doing this way. And also I want to have some mortar bed below these rocks, so this is going to come up even higher than what it is right here. So definitely I need to take some off the back side of this rock to be able to achieve that slope and be able to get enough mortar below here. So this is the kind of stuff you need to think about as the stages kind of wear on and you're getting to this stage. So let's chip this rock. When you have a rock that's thick all the way through, where do you begin? You're not just shaving off a little bit, you need to shave off the entire surface to make the entire surface thinner. To do that, the way I've been doing it, I know this is the side I want to have facing up. Yeah. So I come at it from the side. And these rocks, they're sedimentary rocks like I mentioned before, so you can see straight lines in them generally. And you just pick a plane that you want to go at. There's one that I can see. And you just start tapping with your chisel at this angle with your safety glasses, and mine are a little fogged up at the moment. Unfortunately, with these thicker rocks, I'm probably going to have to do this thinning for all the rocks. So it's going to take a little longer than just laying and trimming the rocks like I was doing before. But let's start this so I can show you the process. So I pick my line. I'm going to chip it down to about right there. So taking about 1/2 inch off. And I'm not tapping hard. And I'm just tapping until I start to see a little crevice in the rock, and then I'm going to move to a different spot. The idea is not to swing with all your might and bust the rock. It's to go slow and then get a nice even break of the rock down the entire length of the plane, or as much of the plane as you can get. And this works better with very well consolidated rocks. If you can see here, there's a crack that's starting to form, and that crack is pretty much perfectly linear. It works very well with well consolidated rocks that are softer and that will break easier. They'll usually just start chipping off, and they won't have this linear effect to them, which makes them more difficult to work with, and it'll probably make it to where those types of rocks will crack easier over time on your patio. So this is definitely, all of these rocks that are Kirkland are definitely much better consolidated rocks than other rocks that are out there. So I'm starting to open this up quite a bit. You get a big piece, just sloughs right on off. And that's about the thickness that I want to get to. So you can see how much I've already taken off, and I'll be doing the same thing on that side as well. Now you can really see why part one of the video was needed. You can see where I put that paver in and how the flagstone comes pretty much right up to the level of the top of the paver. And then above that we have our post base and our pillar. Same thing on the other side. I notched out for the pillar. And now I'm gonna go start filling in the area.
All right, we're finally finished dry laying out all of the flagstone pieces on the patio. We stuck with that 1 to 1/2 inch joint spacing throughout, which meant a lot of cutting and a lot of fit up to get that working. I actually probably spent close to about 3 days, I think, in total, actually laying this all out, which was longer than I expected. It was a huge job, especially with these flagstones relatively small in size. They're not the giant ones that you can cover large areas with one stone. But anyway, yeah, it came out pretty good. I'll show you what it looks like on this side. You can see I really dispersed the color pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with where the dark stones are, the light stones, the different textures of stones, and then over on this side. One cool little feature that my wife thought to add, we live here in Texas, so one stone actually was a good stone to be able to shape to look just like the state. So that was kind of cool. I did notice in doing this that my siding was not perfectly level along the house, so I did shave the siding a bit, and I used the same 4 1/2 inch angle grinder to do that. So I notched out over here. And then a little bit along the edge, it sloped kind of down towards where I'm standing at on this end of the patio. So doing that notch out is going to allow me to lay the flagstone perfectly level throughout the entire length of the patio. One other thing I'd mention is that on the edge, I did not cut the edges. I didn't want them to be perfectly smooth and have a cut edge. I think this sort of natural stone edge just gives it more character. It's more of a rustic look to me, and I just like that better, so I left it that way. And now we are ready to start preparing to mortar the stones down.